Finals week, y'all. I know that some YouTubers manage to have a consistent upload schedule and also be in college at the same time. I am not one of those people, unfortunately. Like, I have an exam for a class tomorrow that I'm almost definitely going to fail. Like, I shouldn't be doing this right now, but here we are. Let's just get into it. We have a lot to talk about here today, and I don't want this video to be too long, so let's just go. Let's just get right into it. At number 5, my fifth favorite album from March 2025, we have Weatherday with Hornet Disaster. Weatherday are back with their second album. It is another helping of their brand of noisy, lo-fi, emo, and indie rock with a sentimental and bittersweet kind of tone, something that I personally like to call traumacore noise pop. This time though, they've gone for something more ambitious because this album is 19 tracks, 76 minutes long. The first leg of tracks is a pretty standard affair for Weatherday. You have melodic, noodly guitar leads, heartfelt and confessional vocals and lyrics, occasional use of synths as well. Structurally, I found the song Take Care of Yourself to be pretty engaging, as it will just randomly break into these cute little electronic down-tempo passages before building back up for one of the catchier choruses on the album. But to me, where things really start to get interesting on this album is with the song Green Tea Seaweed Sea, which begins with acoustic guitar and a gentle flurry of little sounds, creating this dreamlike quality underneath the vocals, which builds into this explosive series of post-hardcore riffs with whimsical and abstract lyrics, making for a very emotionally satisfying moment to say the least. Definitely a highlight on the album for me. The second half of the album is really where we start to see more stylistic variation going on. You have psychedelic depressive ballads such as Heartbeats and Aldehydes. There's also the closing track Heaven Smile, which is this quirky little detour into weird, spacey EDM witch house vibes. And most notably, you have the 8-minute opus Nostalgia Drive Avatar, with its multiple phases and sections that all come back to a similar motif, containing many emotional climaxes and heartfelt melodies. It's really just a real emotional powerhouse of a song. It's this track, as well as some of the other more progressive songs on the album, that really justify its 76-minute length. But with that being said, I do think that the length of this album might be its biggest downfall. There's not really any songs that stand out as being particularly mid or bad compared to the others, but when there's 19 tracks, naturally not all of them are going to hit as hard as others. I feel like maybe the album might be a bit better and more digestible if they condensed it down to only like the best of the best tracks. But even in the album's less engaging moments, I never felt like my time was being wasted. And I think that's owed to the fact that Weatherday has a distinct sound and they know how to write good and fun and creative songs within that sound. I'll wrap this up by saying that in the tumultuous landscape that is emo music in the year 2025, it's nice to see Weatherday still doing their thing, doing it well, and seeing success among audiences after 7 years of making music under that name. Definitely an album worth checking out if you're into emo, indie, and alternative music. Any Limeade fans in my audience? I fucking love this shit. At number 4, we have Featherweight, the second EP from up-and-coming Western Mass indie rockers Bubble Scary, who are back again with another 20-minute record of emotional, noisy post-hardcore, influenced by pioneers of the genre such as Slint, Unwound, Drive Like Jehu, maybe a little bit of Sunny Day Real Estate in there as well. However, on this record, I feel like they've moved away from the dreary, depressive, lethargic kind of sound of their first EP and towards something that is a little bit more direct, angry, in your face, tackling topics of trauma and mental health through vague and abstract lyrics, delivered in this cried out, almost yell singing vocal style over these chaotic, busy, progressive instrumentals with plenty of quieter parts to make the louder climaxes hit all that much harder. The second of the 5 tracks on this EP, Circles, stands out to me in particular, beginning with these very tense, dissonant chords alternating between quieter and louder sections, creating this sense of anxiety and urgency in the listener, building on it with each new riff before breaking into this slow, clean guitar groove halfway through the song. Lyrically, at this point, the narrator is describing feeling like a circle in that they are trapped in this continuous cycle, hoping for a way out, but kind of feeling like it's just in their nature to be this way, at one point even questioning what for. This escalates into a big rhythmic chorus featuring probably the most fun and danceable groove the band has written thus far. This song in particular will always be a favorite for me in a live setting for that reason. I also want to briefly touch on the last couple tracks, which I think are the most impressive in terms of composition. Can't You Hear Me is a brief detour into much quieter, more melancholic territory that carries the listener through these waves of guitar-laden sadness with a subtle psychedelic touch, which was an interesting inclusion that I liked quite a bit. After this, the fifth and final track, I Can Be Honest, just immediately throws you into these busy, chaotic math rock riffs before calming down for a slow, gradual build-up, growing and growing in intensity before reaching probably the most cathartic moment on the record, complete with soaring vocals, pounding drums, and driving guitar riffs. I'll say this much, I feel like a lot of bands in the current hardcore adjacent scene tend to rely on tropes quite a bit and just try to make the most epic shit ever, where it's like, yeah, let's have a breakdown here, and clean vocals here, then this kind of riff and that kind of riff. And that's fun and awesome, and by no means a bad thing. In fact, the metalcore band that I'm in is very much an example of that kind of songwriting. But I feel like it's important to have bands like Bubble Scary to kind of balance that out, where they're more focused on subtlety and dynamics, tight, emotional songwriting, not trying to call back to a specific sound or bygone era of music, but rather just being a rock band and playing what they want to play and doing it well. Check out this EP, it's just under 20 minutes and well worth your time, and really just show love for Bubble Scary, man, because I feel like they have a very promising career ahead of them if they just keep putting out music as good as their first two EPs have been. Moving on, at number 3 we have Goldstar, the 6th studio album from NYC experimental death metal veterans Imperial Triumphant. Known for their ugly, discordant riffs, not unlike classic bands in the genre such as Gorguts and Immolation, mixed with death growls that have an almost cult-like chanting quality to them, as well as their satirical portrayal of the modern consumerist hellscape that is New York City, doing so by crafting these really long, progressive, winding songs that incorporate elements of black metal as well as avant-garde jazz, making for some of the weirdest, most disturbing, and inaccessible music that the modern metal landscape has to offer that even a regular listener of death metal might have a hard time getting into. However, on this album they've done something interesting by streamlining their sound just a little bit, writing relatively shorter songs with a 38-minute album runtime, focusing on writing memorable and catchy riffs without sacrificing any of the experimental edge that they've always had. For example, the main riff in the song Hotel Sphinx is actually quite melodic and slightly triumphant, a vibe that the band isn't typically known for, but because this is Imperial Triumphant, it's played in a way that is very jarring and disorienting. To me, Hotel Sphinx is one of, if not the best songs on the album for several reasons, but it's that main riff that really ties it all together and makes it stand out instantly. But beyond the thrilling compositions and gripping performances, I was very impressed by the dark, apocalyptic, dystopian atmosphere that Imperial Triumphant manages to craft throughout this album's runtime. There's just so much attention to detail in this regard, be it the dramatic horns that play in sync with the massive riffs at the beginning of the opening track, Eye of Mars, or the sudden break into this old school, campy, sci-fi movie-esque keyboard passage towards the end of the aforementioned Hotel Sphinx, or most notably the Goldstar interlude, which is this parody of 1950s barbershop style cigarette commercials. It is such an immensely detailed and well-crafted album that really deserves its own video. But before we move on, I want to at least talk about the closing track, Industry of Misery, which begins with this smooth yet ominous dark jazz intro before a rush of dissonant guitar riffs comes crashing in. It continues on this way much like many of the other songs on the album before the halfway point, where it suddenly switches into a slow, repetitive, psychedelic doom metal dirge. And if it sounds familiar, that is because it is a pretty clear homage to the 1969 Beatles song I Want You, She's So Heavy off of Abbey Road, which referencing a Beatles song on a fucking death metal album, even if it is one of the Beatles' heaviest songs, is insane. And what's even more insane is that it fucking works so well. And I know I just kind of spoiled the ending of the album, but believe me, it does not hit any less hard even when you know it's coming. So yeah, fucking awesome record. If you're looking to get into this band or just more avant-garde strains of metal music in general, I could see this album being a very good starting point. And this album is just the latest release in the large canon of proof that New York death metal stays winning. Sorry Florida, sorry Sweden, I don't make the rules. Just kidding, I love bands from both of those places, but still, New York, fucking peak, dude. Now, these top two albums are from two of my favorite artists, both of which I've been listening to since high school, but I swear I'm not being biased when I say that they are genuinely probably the two best releases of 2025 so far. And coincidentally, they both came out on March 28th. And that's also why this video took so long. You had two amazing albums from two amazing artists come out right at the end of the month, and it took me a while to process my thoughts on them. At number 2, we have the 5th studio album from Zambian-Canadian rapper Ashanti Mutinta, aka Backwash, Only Dust Remains. With her past few records, Backwash has become known for combining social, political, and personal lyrics with dark occult imagery, heavy industrial beats, and an aggressive vocal delivery. Now, coming after 3 years of studio silence, this new record sees her going in a notably less abrasive direction, moving away from her typical metal and industrial influences and embracing a more low-key, atmospheric hip-hop sound, influenced by various types of chill, rock, and electronic music, which is an appropriate sound for the sadder, more introspective tone of this album, with lyrical themes about overcoming addiction and mental health struggles after years of self-improvement, even finding solace in religion and spirituality. She starts things off on a very cold and somber note with the opening track Black Lazarus, a song that constantly builds in emotional intensity throughout its 5-minute runtime, with Backwash laying out a lot of the themes that get explored on this record over this grandiose yet chilling beat. Following this is the 7-minute multi-phased powerhouse of a song, Wake Up, which out of all the songs in this album probably bears the most resemblance to her earlier material, due to its driving industrial rock beat, aggressive rapping, confrontational lyrics, and dark themes. In the second half of the album, we get my personal favorite track, Dissociation, which takes a very cloud rap influenced approach with the instrumental, bringing in hazy synths, blaring shoegaze guitars, and emo sung portions, creating a psychedelic atmosphere but contrasting it with very sober lyrics about a complicated journey with drug and alcohol abuse, complete with some very straightforward, hard-hitting bars. Things really swell in the instrumental for the second verse as well as the sung outro by rapper Chloe Hotline, taking you from this dark place at the beginning of the track to a very warm, spiritual place towards the end, finishing with the uplifting mantra, and I'm starting to feel like I'm back in control, and I'm starting to feel like I'm past this road. It's really a beautiful song. It nearly moved me to tears the first time I heard it. Immediately following this, we get probably the most overtly political song on the album, History of Violence, where she talks about the ongoing genocide in Palestine and relates it to the violence faced by women and racial minorities in the Western countries that are fueling said genocide, then relating this violence and bigotry back to her own personal experience as a black trans woman navigating the world day by day, all on top of this huge anthemic synth-backed beat. It's definitely a highlight. Now, Backwash's music has always been pretty introspective and personal, but if her previous albums sound like someone coming from a place of personal chaos and turmoil, this album sort of feels like the self-reflective calm after the storm, and there's an intense sadness and grief there, but also a sense of relief and comfort. And the end result is, I think, one of her best and most moving albums yet, which I have no doubt will be a contender for Rap Album of the Year. No way, I've been recording for an hour. What the fuck, dude? At number 1, we have the 6th album from California post-black metal band Deafheaven with lonely people with power. So Deafheaven is a band that has meant a lot to me for most of my teen years and up until now. They were one of many incredible bands that I discovered when I was around 15 that not only helped me get through the pandemic, but very much shaped who I am today and influenced my music taste. And even after several listens of this new album here, I still struggle to put into words how truly incredible and meaningful it is within the greater context of the band's artistic evolution, as well as how meaningful it is to me personally. I have a video planned for the near future where I'm going to go more in depth about that, but for now I'm going to limit myself and only really talk about the music and the songs that stood out to me. But I do need to give a little bit of context at least. Deafheaven are a band who have become known for popularizing the blackgaze sound throughout the 2010s, that being a combination of atmospheric black metal with shoegaze elements. But for them specifically, there has always been a multitude of influences beyond that, most notably post-rock and screamo, various kinds of alternative and indie rock, as well as some more riffy, heavy black metal in the mix too. And on this new record, they've somehow managed to do all of that while simultaneously crafting one of their most cohesive, replayable, instantly impactful albums yet. And I don't say that lightly, there really is so much to love about this album. One minute you're getting these huge, powerful, progressive black metal songs such as the opening track Doberman as well as Revelator. Next you're getting catchier, more indie rock and dream pop influenced tracks such as Heathen and Body Behavior, or soaring, epic, synth-laden ballads such as Amethyst and the cathartic penultimate track Winona. There's plenty of callbacks to their earlier material on the album too. For example, the black metal banger Magnolia is very reminiscent of the thrashy, immortal influence sound that they did with their 2018 single Black Brick. And I think it's no mistake that Winona is structurally and tonally very similar to their most popular song, Dream House, from their 2013 album Sunbather. And speaking of Sunbather, I noticed that they brought back the idea of using interludes throughout the album to segue into new musical ideas. The most effective use of this, in my opinion, is the track Incidental 2, which ends with this deafening wall of noise and shrieking that perfectly transitions into the darkest and heaviest track on the album, Revelator. I also really appreciated the lyrical approach of this album. I feel like vocalist George Clark is usually known for writing in the moment, telling his story as it unfolds, but this album takes a more reflective approach, thinking back on childhood experiences that shaped the person he is today. One particularly dark lyric on the song Magnolia kinda sums up the themes of this record pretty well. I was everything taught to me, drinking deeply the truth of my grief. Lastly, I want to say that I loved the approach they took with this album where instead of cramming a bunch of ideas into 4 10-plus minute songs with a few shorter tracks in between, like they've done on previous records, they've instead opted to make a 12-track album with mostly 4 to 8 minute songs, give or take. And as a result, this is probably the most replayable and one of the more accessible Deafheaven albums. I could honestly go on and on and on. Like I said, I'll be making a video pretty soon that will go more in depth about this album as well as Deafheaven's discography in general. But for now, I'll just say that this is the album I've always wanted from Deafheaven in the 5 years that I've been listening to them. I've always known they had it in them to make something as good as this, and I'm honestly just really happy to hear it and super excited to see these songs played live in a couple weeks. If you somehow haven't heard this record yet, please listen to it. It is just everything. That's gonna be it for this video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I feel like March was honestly just such a stacked month for new music. Way more so than January and February, if I'm being completely honest. The semester is almost over, so hopefully I'll be able to upload more frequently during the summer, but I have learned that I am someone who cannot make promises when it comes to this sort of thing, unfortunately, so it'll just be what it is, and that's just gonna have to be good enough. Either way, thanks so much for sticking around and watching my videos anyway. It really means the most. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you are new. This has been Mavis Evelyn. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and it is 1:15 a.m. I need to fucking sleep, dude. What the fuck?